Hey guys, I'm coming to you with some breaking news. We just found out like 2 hours ago that Hopoo Games is officially disbanding. This week just keeps getting crazier and crazier. Reading the tweet here, today we have an exciting update. Duncan and Paul, alongside many other talented members at Hopoo Games, will be working on game development directly at Valve Software. We're incredibly grateful to Valve for their partnership in the last decade, and we're excited to continue working on their awesome titles. However, this does mean that we're stopping production on our unannounced game, Snail. Big RIP there for Snail. It's been an exciting and transformative 12 years. We feel lucky for the opportunities we've had and deeply appreciate both our team and fans that have supported us and our games. We love making games and will continue to do so for years to come, but we're excited to be working side by side with the talented people at Valve. But for now, sleep tight, Hopoo Games. 07 for Hopoo Games here. Kind of some bittersweet news. On one hand, I am really happy for Hopoo Games. I mean, Valve Software is like... it's pretty much the top of the top in the game industry, and it sounds like they're excited to be working there. So that's awesome news for Hopoo Games and everyone on the team. Couldn't be more excited for them. It is a little bit sad that we're not going to see their game Snail, which I think they've been working on at least since Returns came out, and maybe even a little bit before then if they were working on two games simultaneously, which I think they might have been. So that's a little bit sad. Hopoo just retweeted it, pinned this. And then Nick also retweeted it, friend of the channel, Bazazaron, who also got hired at Valve. Sad to see the Snail there. You know what that means now, but not in a good way. Hopefully we'll see something with it now that we know it's not going to be developed anymore, some like concept art or what the game was going to be. I'm curious about it, and I'm a little sad we're not going to get to see it, but it is what it is. Now, when it comes to Risk of Rain Returns, that is not great news. We talked about in the last video how Gearbox Publishing doesn't exist anymore. Now Hopoo doesn't either. So that's kind of a big rip for Risk of Rain Returns. I do want to go over something though. In the last video, I fucked up. I made a mistake. I showed two screenshots from this conversation from Creeps here and another developer that I said worked at Hopoo. So first thing I got wrong there. This is not somebody that works at Hopoo. This was somebody that was contracted for Risk of Rain Returns. They'd never worked directly with Hopoo, from what I understand, talking to Creeps. Additionally, I didn't realize that there was a full thread, a full conversation here. I just saw the two screenshots on the Twitter, and I saw that's all there was. I am clearly not very good with technology, but I want to correct that now, so we're just going to go through this. I don't agree with everything, but there's some interesting little tidbits in here. I got the chance to talk with Deeger, a developer for Risk of Rain Returns, about his perspective on the very controversial DLC for Risk of Rain 2, Seekers of the Storm, as well as some insight into development. D gave me explicit permission to share what he thinks to others. D, if you're reading this, thank you for sharing, and if I do get something wrong, I'll adjust as best I can. You're a great developer, and it was a great time talking to you while I was getting my car fixed. And then here it just says, am I allowed to share what you have to say? And he goes, sure. Are you still working on Risk of Rain, or is your contract basically over? I haven't really worked on Risk of Rain since last year, but I'm still in contact. Okay, and then D's first impressions are the game is definitely broken and that he has no strong feelings. He further explains that what was broken so far is probably going to be fixed within a week and that people have the right to be mad, but the game is also definitely fixable. What do you think of the new update to Risk of Rain 2? LOL. No strong feelings one way or the other, just waiting for it to get patched up first. I think people are justified to be upset, but the game isn't over or anything. I think a lot of the hate's being radicalized as if the game's unplayable forever when the fixes are actually super easy. I think a lot of people are just kind of sick of things breaking day one after a lot of games came out that needed day one patches, let alone for a game that was already working 95% of the time before the DLC dropped. The hate is justifiable, but definitely radicalized. Yeah, people being mad is fine, but it's silly to insist it's over and the game won't recover. The most notable issues will be fixed in like a week, which I don't know. I want to believe that's true, but here's the thing. Gearbox developed the console port for Risk of Rain 2, which is kind of a notoriously buggy and not the best port of the game, right? So back in 2022, when they bought the IP, a lot of people were scared. They thought they would treat the game the same way they did on console, and they would ruin it. I was somebody that was saying, let's give them a chance, let's see what they have to offer, and then when we do eventually get this update 2 years down the road, it feels like all of our fears were justified. Gearbox historically has not really done a great job with the game. If Hopoo made this and it released like this, I think people would be a lot more faithful, but it's just the fact that Gearbox hasn't really been proactive about it, at least from our end. Like, every update on console has taken months to do. We haven't really gotten any content for PC in a long time, and there's just like a lot of scary signs with it. I hope it is fixed, and I want to give them another chance here, but it's just it's scary to see, and I don't think a lot of people have faith in Gearbox at this point, myself included, but I'm happy to see that they are working on a patch. Spoilers for Seekers of the Storm, skip to the next tweet if you care. D further explains that he has actually seen the False Sun and Chef a year ago, and it seemed fine, if not higher back then, but he also explains that the code isn't exactly incomplete, but more so was early code. He says it's a complex issue, like it seems ship breaking was a very late in development thing. Oh, for real? I had a feeling a lot of what I saw was a product of rushing to meet a deadline instead of incompetence. I agree there. I do not think console parody was originally planned, and I saw a lot of content like a year ago, including False Sun and Chef. It was in similar levels of polish, if not higher back then, and the examples of bad code aren't examples of incompetence, but rather prototyping code where cleanliness isn't really a concern as much as getting the concept working in practices, which is, you know, it's good. I hope it is prototyping code and not just bad code. I don't know anything about programming, to be clear. I'm an idiot. I don't even know how a Twitter thread works, so I can't really speak on this too much. I will say, though, I have friends that have done game development and are modders for the game, and one of my friends told me that one of the first things they teach you in game development is to not tie things to the frame rate. So, like, that's kind of where I've got that perspective, but I could totally be wrong about that, and maybe it is just prototyping code. Either way, at this point, the game is broken, and I mean, there's a whole list of bugs here, like 6 pages of just found bugs so far, and I'm sure there's more. So that's kind of not reassuring to see, you know. I hope they do fix it. In a week, I'm not sure. The code was using the lowest common denominator, that being the console versions, and it made with the intent to clean it up so everything is consistent. Going out of order, the DMs for a moment to explain the point a little bit more, the benefit of what Gearbox did here. From a game development standpoint, it's often a smart choice to work with the lowest common denominator up, aka use the code you know works on all consoles regardless of how buggy it is, and then clean that up. So that way you have the code base that's consistent. This way, if something is broken, it's consistently broken, which makes it far easier to fix. Instead of developing like 7 different versions of a game with all unique bugs, you're developing one with shared bugs, which, you know, they said that initially when they talked about unifying the code base. And I like the idea behind it, but it just seems like in practice, we now have 7 buggy versions of the game instead of one that's at least good, right? So that's kind of hard, but like I get the intention behind it. Like Minecraft does that too with Bedrock Edition. The difference there is that you can still play the Java edition. In this case, they completely replaced the version of the game that worked and introduced all these new bugs, and a lot of them are from console that are now on PC, and that's hard to see. So I don't know. I get the intention. I just don't think it's been working very well so far. I hope I'm wrong, and I hope they can fix all of the versions of the game. I would love to see console be more like the PC version of the game, but so far it seems like PC has been more like the console version. Is that now there is console and PC parity. Crossplay obviously has its own issues, but this is definitely a step into making consoles as great as PC could be eventually. This is huge into making sure that bugs across all platforms are fixed eventually. He goes on to say here, the developers of the DLC are very much skilled and understand what kind of game they're developing for. They just were dealt a bad hand and things broke. When the DLC is fixed up, a lot of this mess will wash over, and with how well it's sold, I'm certain we'll see more Risk of Rain 2 content down the line. That's reassuring to see from somebody that's worked with Gearbox. The biggest takeaway is that now we have real, true console parity, which also means that fixes applied to the game are global, which means an incident like this is not likely to occur again, and on top of that, any updates and fixes PC gets will also be applied to console, meaning consoles are no longer playing catch-up forever. Although, in the last dev diary they put out, they did say that they're working on a PC patch first, so I don't know how true that is, but I think it's probably right that consoles will be soon to follow. You're not going to have to wait 6 months again, I'm hoping. So in theory, can we get crossplay soon? It's possible, but unlikely. Crossplay has its own set of issues, among which being required matchmaking servers, which is a gigantic expense, which it is, but man, I hope they do it, because even like before Gearbox, like ever since the game came out, multiplayer has been kind of funky. Like, even if I'm playing with somebody that's 2 states away, we run into like desync issues and problems. I do want to see them give multiplayer a little bit more love. Well, not soon. I meant more, this is a step in the right direction, more or less. He also further explains from his perspective how the famous Nintendo quote is way too overused and is oversimplified and only works for Nintendo. Furthermore, how console parody seems to be a development very late in the process. That's interesting. Bully Randy, Pitchfork, and his pitchfork dick, by the way. I didn't say that. Additionally, people love to toss around that rush/delayed Nintendo quote, but that's missing so much context and is insanely short-sighted. I've always found that quote to be fair, but oversimplified. But yeah, sure, I'd rather a game not get rushed and have bug fixes properly done, but delays always have other reasons for them that could relate to corporate reasons. Duke Nukem 3D was in development hell for, if I recall correctly, 10 years and didn't turn up well. The main issue is that only really Nintendo can afford to just delay a game. When delaying a game, you have to spend more money to redo/extend the marketing. You gotta convince investors, renegotiate with platforms like Sony, Microsoft, and Nintendo, and if you need things to line up, that just adds to the pile of issues. This often makes delays not a real possibility for perfectly normal reasons. Nintendo only has to deal with Nintendo, making the release process infinitely smoother for them. That's a good point. The quote only applies for big companies. Indie companies and AA, I believe is the name, can't afford to really have those delays in the first place, and that makes for a tough moment. Even big companies often can't. Wasn't Survivors of the Void also delayed for a few months? Yes. So, okay, couple thoughts here. I think this is actually an argument against unifying the codebase, because as Creeps pointed out, Survivors of the Void was delayed, if not multiple times. So releasing an expansion on all platforms simultaneously, I can see where you would run into issues with like Microsoft, Sony, Nintendo if you have to delay an update. I think this is actually one of the main arguments against not unifying the codebase, if that makes sense. I could be totally wrong here, but it kind of seems like that's what they're saying, and it makes sense why delaying a game would be a big deal for a company, but it seems like, if we're just talking about the PC port, it would be a little bit easier, right? He goes on to say games like Cyberpunk were infamously delayed because the game was straight up and objectively unplayable and unreleasable. You saw the state that it launched in, and you can only imagine how bad it was before then. Meanwhile, Nintendo can swap around Splatoon 3 and Xeno's 3 release dates because they just can. As a result, you can't really blame Gearbox for the game being rushed. I think you can, but okay. Not to say you can't bully Randy, he always deserves it, especially after taking credit and pretending that bugs aren't real, but games are complex, layered endeavors where a lot of things can easily go wrong if you don't account for one thing. In this case, it's very, very evident that console parity came up very late in development, and a lot of things broke, causing them to more or less start over and play catch-up, re-implementing things that were already implemented. So I think that's extremely interesting to me, because Gearbox has been saying for like a year and a half that they want to unify the code base. It doesn't seem like it came up late in development. Like I have here, this is on the Wayback Machine because this is actually a deleted post, but it's from April of 2023, and they're talking about Survivors of the Void on console and where it is, right? So they say, we want to update everyone on the progress of Survivors of the Void on console versions. First, we want you to know it's still our top priority. We're making strong progress, but it's taken longer than any of us has expected. The reason this has been such a time-consuming undertaking is that it isn't a traditional port situation. We're rebuilding every console version of Risk of Rain 2 from the ground up, so we'll be able to unify the codebase across all platforms. This will significantly enhance our ability to fix bugs, deliver performance improvements, and release updates in the future, which is what Dee was saying. But this is from a year and a half ago. So it's interesting to me that he's claiming it happened late in development. I don't know. Those two things kind of conflict to me. Why did you choose to completely rebuild the console code before releasing Survivors of the Void on console? Historically, Risk of Rain 2 players on console have not had the same quality of experience as players on PC. Taking the time to rework the code at a fundamental level gives us the best foundation for delivering future content and creating a better experience on consoles. Releasing Survivors of the Void on consoles prior to taking this step would simply be kicking a can and allowing ourselves to settle for an experience unfit for players. That's a little ironic. We completely get the urge to want it sooner, and we wish we could get it to you sooner. So I don't know. It seems like they planned to do this for a long time. That was the excuse they gave for delaying Survivors of the Void on console, is that they were completely rebuilding the code base from the ground up. So I don't know, it just seems like a bit of a contradiction there. So overall, from what I understand only as a gamer and not a coder, Gearbox did fuck up, but the team is also very passionate and wants to fix many of the issues. Unifying the codebase means many more fixes can happen, and we should see less bugs as time goes on. I'm skeptical, but I hope you're right. This doesn't mean you shouldn't be mad that the DLC and game are currently a mess. This thread is meant to share a conversation and gain insight into the situation, as well as some other tidbits of discussion that involve marketing, something I haven't considered fully. There was a lot about some internal discussions. We saw the tweets from Hopoo and Gore, and I did bring it up with D. I just don't want to share them currently because I didn't want to stir up more drama. If there are enough requests, I'll share what he has to say. I love Risk of Rain, and having this opportunity is something I never thought I'd be able to have. D, once again, thank you for giving me this chance to ask a lot of questions. If there are any more questions, feel free to share, and I'll answer best I could. This is my first time making one of these long-form tweets, let alone about something I'm so passionate about, and if something is wrong, please let me know, and I'll do what I can to fix it next time. Alright, please ease off the devs. They're hard workers doing what they can here. I believe that Hopoo's tweet regarding the state of the game is very accurate and people are being way too hard on the developers. It's clear with their constant statements they care a lot about the game, and then he just informs them of the tweet. It's nice to see some elaboration from him. Maybe that'll get people to ease off the devs. And again, I'm not trying to be critical of the devs. I think it's the higher-ups. I think it's Randy Pitchford. I think it's the higher-ups at Take-Two that are doing this. I think the team that is working on Risk of Rain is understaffed. I have heard the team is actually smaller than Hopoo Games, which is like, if you think about it, it makes sense why we'd run into some issues if we're dealing with like 3 or 4 people making an entire content expansion. So I hope that they hire more people and undo some of the cutbacks. From what I understand, once Take-Two took over earlier this year, they cut back a lot of the team for Risk of Rain. I mean, I even saw some of that from my end. I don't know. I hope they just hire more people. I think it's the higher-ups at Gearbox and Take-Two, again. Update Risk of Rain Returns has not received any updates because Gearbox Publishing no longer exists, according to D. I think we talked about this in the last video. Gearbox Publishing no longer exists. We can make the update, but we do not have the practical means to submit it in any way due to our publisher just not being real anymore. It's not a legal issue, which I don't know. After talking with D, it appears the update with the fabled mod support is more up in the air than I thought. It all kind of depends if a publisher is willing to help them push out the update, which is tough when it's already a pre-existed IP. This does not mean that an update to Risk of Rain Returns will never happen, right? It's just hard to get one out. It means we realistically just don't know. It's kind of not up to us. And I think this this did not age great because we just found out earlier that Hopoo Games is gone. So not only is Gearbox Publishing, but Hopoo Games is gone now. Both parties involved in Risk of Rain Returns are disbanded. So yeah, I think it's unlikely that we're going to see anything dealing with Risk of Rain Returns in the future. Unfortunately, I love that game. Hey guys, so as I was exporting this video, Creeps hit me up and said he asked D about it, and he says, heard the news that Hopoo Games is working for Valve now. I assume you're not part of the celebration since you're only contracted. He says, yeah, I'm not a Valve dev. Not that it's a bad thing. I'm super happy for him. Should be noticed, the news are almost certainly the other big reason why Risk of Rain Returns update status is in big limbo. Makes sense, maybe Valve could help with the update status for all we know, right? Just anything can happen. Yeah, it's ultimately another case of we don't know. It should also be elaborated that despite wanting to update Risk of Rain Returns, it was never a guaranteed thing internally and was only ever advertised due to miscommunication. Internally, despite the game being developed to be modded, we never actually knew if the game was going to get continued development or not. The tools were made so they would be accessible via unofficial modding intentionally as a result. Wait, so modding support was never guaranteed? He says, yeah, it wasn't. It was always a thing that we wanted, but wasn't something we meant to promise. It was something I think they did promise, and they said a content update as well. But at this point, there's so many factors involved, and I totally get it. But yeah, I just wanted to update you guys on that real quick, because this just happened as I was about to upload the video. But yeah, that's going to be it for this video. I'm not going to make another one of these until Gearbox puts out the patch. I feel like I've said all that needs to be said at this point, and I can only do so many Pegasus thumbnails before it starts to get annoying. Some of you might already be there. You're like, come on, Disputed. Stop farming the content. So yeah, this is going to be the last one. But I hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know what your thoughts on this are. I'm kind of conflicted. I don't agree with everything, and some of these just seem like a contradiction to me. But that's going to be it for the video, and I hope you guys have a lovely day. Take care.